everybody. Leif Jackson here with our advisory board. Super excited to have you all here. Really excited for today. Quick question for all of you. So just want to have you introduce yourselves and then talk a little bit about, why Cybrary and, why join the board, right? So Chris, can we start with you?
Sure. My name is Chris Kubecka, and I'm the CEO of HypaSec in the Netherlands. And I do a lot of stuff and things in cyber warfare and offensive security and advising governments on various strategies and tactics. And I joined the board of Cybrary because from at least my point of view, the way that the digital world is going is we have digital bombs flying at us at the speed of light, and we need to have accessible and quick training to be able to thwart a lot of those different threats.
Cool. And how did you find us originally?
Well, I ended up finding Cybrary through a friend who happened to do a course whose name is Jeff Mann, and he brought me to a party over in Las Vegas, and I ended up talking to some of the Cybrary folks there, and I got to know Cybrary then, and I thought, well, why not try to join forces?
Awesome. Chris, how about you?
Hey, Leif. Chris Hodson, CISO of Tanium. I'm just trying to think how I got to know about Cybrary. I think it was just through some of my employees and maybe some people in the industry that I was speaking with who wanted access, to Chris's point, to kind of a real kind of broad set of cybersecurity information, and also making sure that that's multimedia as well, not just videos, but actually being able to back that up with some community conversations and learning from others in the industry. So I came on board actually as a mentor originally, kind of helping people in the industry. I've worked in end user environments for I think 16 or 17 years as a CISO, an architect, a designer, an engineer. So I've also got real world experience to give to people starting out in cybersecurity. So moved on from there to the advisory board where, we have the opportunity again to give our views from the field on sort of shaping the direction for curriculum for Cybrary, and giving that feedback.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. And Vishal.
Hi, Leif. And team, this is Vishal Gupta. I'm the CTO at Unisys. I'm also member of the Forbes Technology Council and the Wall Street Journal CIO Council. I learned about Cybrary more from some of my teammates at Symantec first, and I was intrigued that this company was actually local since I'm based in DC as well. And then I had the opportunity to get to know Leif. And I did think, I was inspired by the mission because, we know in 2021 there'll be 3.5 million unfulfilled jobs in cyber, and Cybrary has 2.5 million people on its platform. So I thought if anybody can do it, these guys can. And so, here I am, and hoping to see if we can change the balance and get a little bit ahead of the challenge that we are facing with Cybrary.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And Ed?
Well, great. Ed Amoroso. I run a company called Tag Cyber, the research and advisory. I've been doing cybersecurity for almost 40 years now. It's like forever. And have had a lifelong commitment to training and education, mostly in kind of traditional areas. So I guess I represent maybe a demographic that grew up with opinions about learning that might be kind of traditional, maybe perhaps even a bit curmudgeon at times, where I was always sort of a staunch advocate that, the way God intended learning to be, as an instructor in front of a room with a blackboard and a piece of chalk, and be quiet and listen. But I've learned over the years that can really be improved on. And I know... So I'm an example of somebody who, old dog being taught some new tricks. And Leif, when you and I met, we did a couple of courses together. So I kind of came to Cybrary as an instructor, frankly, and I loved it. And I've grown to really appreciate the community aspect and some of the things that are really quite innovative about the way the company works and the way these new approaches to learning progress. So I'm glad that. I've was at least somewhat flexible enough to take on some new approaches. So I'm very happy to be here helping, and it's been a fun journey.
Well, thank you, Ed. I think you speak to, hey, with the blackboard kind of thing, you're using 20th century tools to solve a 21st century problem. So here we are, right? And we appreciate having you as well. So, I mean, just so excited, so many questions, but I think let's just start with like some of the trends that you're seeing in the space and how do you see Cybrary helping out in those trends? So anyone want to start?
I'll take a few around ensuring that you don't just have technical training, that you have training around methodologies and process. So something I get asked about fairly regularly is around this whole DevOps culture and DevSecOps more pertinently. How do you embed security into environments where you have ephemeral workloads, you have continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines? I remember in my end user days, you would have a security assurance activity. You could run a pen test for, let's say, 5 days. You'd have the results sent to your organization. You'd have 5 days to discuss them, and then someone might make a decision on go, no go. The whole end-to-end process is like 3 months. Those requirements for cybersecurity still exist, protect information, but we now have to do that at breakneck speed. So that's a trend that I'm seeing. You know, when we have infrastructure as code and you can deploy servers in seconds, how do you ensure that you still have that security assurance and that integrity of solutions? So that's probably number one. And I suppose directly related to that is kind of cloud architecture. When I did my MCSE and my CompTIA exams way back when, everything was on-prem, everything was physical hardware in a data center. And challenge I'm seeing now are people trying to shift from that world to learning about micro-segmentation, zero trust, and like I said, ephemeral workloads. So there are a couple that I'm seeing at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see us playing in those spaces?
Just keeping the creator network up to date, keeping content fresh, getting feedback from your students as well over kind of maybe potential gaps and areas that they want you to explore further. But, you know, we've never seen technology change this quickly, so the curriculum needs to adapt, and I think that's why having us here to give our opinions, I hope anyway, is going to be useful.
Absolutely.
You know, on this topic of speed and agility, I have a personal story that it might help show the difference between the old days and new. Back in 1990, I started writing a textbook in cybersecurity, and about 2 years later, I pitched it to what's now Macmillan. It was then Prentice Hall, and I'll never forget the reaction they had when I sent this manuscript, 400-page manuscript on cybersecurity. They said, "We already have a book. Dorothy Denning wrote one 7 years ago. So why do we need another cybersecurity book?" And I said, well, a couple of things have changed, and it took quite a bit of push for them to agree to publish the book, thinking, why would you possibly need a second cybersecurity textbook when we had, just compare that to where we are now, where things change so quickly. The threat changes, technology changes, the expectations of teams around your ability to ingest and then get real productive fast, those have all changed. And I just think it's funny to compare it back to a time when we measured progress in decades as opposed to minutes. So again, I think it's part of the value of a community such as the one Cybrary sets up, because it's supportive. It's not easy. It was easier then. You could read a book and it was worth it because it would stick with you for a while. Now you really do need the supportive elements of a network and a community to help you keep up. It's not so easy anymore.
Makes sense.
So maybe just building on that, I think as we're all discussing, the world is changing and changing very fast. I think we need a new way to learn, and I do think Cybrary has the opportunity to be that platform, because the threats are evolved. You know, we need learning at the speed of threat. And if you think about what that means, there are 58% of the organizations got breached, in the last 2 years. This means, we need not just to bring new people into cybersecurity, we need to also train the existing people that are there into how the threat landscape is changing. As Chris said, cloud will do $500 billion in 2023. A lot of the workloads are shifting there. The way you protect a cloud is very different than how you protect on-prem. The way you protect an IoT device, which is out in the field, is very different than what you can do with your computer. How do you even track it? How do you get visibility to it? And so I think the world needs a new learning platform that can be personalizable, that can be nonlinear, that can scale fast, that can scale at the speed of the challenge. And that, I think, is the opportunity that we all have.
Yeah, I mean, the world has definitely changed. We have gone from an analog world to a digital world, and everything is basically an IoT device in one way, shape, or form. You can think about aircraft, you can think about cargo ships, you can think about building management systems. There are elevators that are connected to the internet. And this has gotten to be so concerning that I was speaking on an event for transparency and control of IoT devices at the United Nations IGF in November and presenting some of those threats and risks. Now, how do you address that if you are not able to take the newest and greatest training that is matched up with some of those threats? It's moving so fast, continuous in cybersecurity. And how do you also do that if you would have to go to a more traditional training place and travel and get things approved for travel and miss out work, miss out on your family? I see Cybrary as very beneficial because you can take short, bite-size, exactly what you need, pick and pull at the moment that you need it, anytime and anywhere. Just like the digital world is now, because of cloud, become from a very, very big analog world to a very, very small digital world, and data is everywhere and you need it now. So I see a lot of benefits in the model of Cybrary because of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks very much. And, building on that, like, what do you think the world looks like if we're successful, right, in the next, 10 years or so?
I think Ed was summing it up well when he talked about kind of pace of change in books. If you're successful and information is consumed in a bite-sized model, then that's the way that people will receive that. I think we're already seeing that outside of the cyber world. So, I subscribe to a service called Blinkist. So instead of reading a book cover to cover that might be 700 pages, there's a 15-minute version of it to get the salient points. Now, you might miss some of the detail, and the detail might be relevant for a particular role or maybe even personal enjoyment, but you're still getting the information you need to do your job. Now, as Chris was saying about technology being so vast and there being so many different connected devices and different sets of technology, you don't have the luxury always of having a 700-page book that you can go through to cover. You need to find an index. You need to be able to go somewhere, get what you need when you need it. And I think if Cybrary is successful, that will be the de facto way of learning.
You can kind of talk about things that won't change and things that will. Like here's what won't change. And the irony is I'm going to describe things that are changing. That's what won't change. But threat, for example, it's going to continue to progress. Don't even think that's going to slow down. Sure. In fact, it probably accelerates. Technology change, that's going to continue to progress. You just have to assume that something you learned now is likely to be obsolete in some short period of time. So that is a given. And then the business landscape continues to change. It's fun to look at the Fortune 100 30 years ago, and you see a lot of companies go, wow, they went out of business, and wow, it's a very different profile. So as a career learner, you have to start with this assumption that those things will continue to change. But here's some things that won't change, things that I think in a sense are important for a human being. I don't think your ability to ingest information and to learn as a human being at some point will you're going to hit a wall. I think you can read so much, you can ingest so much. I don't think you could do any more than young people do now online, right? You look at the kinds of things that young people are being exposed to on the internet. I think your brain will explode if it's any more. So I do think at some point, your question, where is this all going? I think at some point you have to level out, and there has to be a common kind of approach to learning that's not this future way of doing it. It becomes the accepted way, well, subject to the things that changed before. And I think these themes that we talk about, community, network, online, supportive, those sound like the right words to me. So I think if you get to the point where that's normal, as opposed to, wow, let me tell you about this innovative thing we do with community and network, I think that has to be the norm. Again, in cybersecurity, we have to assume threat, business, technology, those things are going to be changing. Those are definitely, you have to assume that. But maybe we can get to a point where you match up community network support with the human being's ability to learn, and that becomes a new norm. I hope we can get to that. I know there's a lot of complex themes that are in there, but it's important because the vast majority of people right now learn in a school setting that's still pretty traditional. And then you go, look, I'm guilty. I teach in 2 universities. It's still pretty traditional. I still stand on a blackboard and I lecture. Is that optimal? I think probably not. And I think that, if anything, getting to the point where it's assumed that community means learning, and it's assumed that you don't just zero in on something on your own and learn without a network of supportive people. And we know that technology and people, all those things go together. That'd be a nice future. I hope we can get to that point. We're definitely not there today, sort of globally. I think Cybrary gives a little peek into what it can look like. But I hope we get to that norm, because then that probably makes us all smarter and makes it a little easier to ingest and learn. So I hope that's where we go.
That's a great one, and it's hard to top that. So I'll just maybe give some brief thoughts. I think, in my mind, it's not if but it's when. So when Cybrary is successful, not if Cybrary is successful. What I think that success will look like are maybe 3 parameters. One, we're headed to this world of not one time, but rather a lifelong learning. And my hope is, for the world of cyber, Cybrary is going to be able to make that lifelong learning vision happen for the people who are interested in working in this field. The second piece, which I thought was very eloquently mentioned by Ed, was, we already have 100 times more content than before. And if all Cybrary did was multiply that by another 100 times, that's not what's useful. What's useful is to actually be able to very dynamically assess what's truly needed and be able to present that in a compelling, digestible way. So we can more intelligently go after this threat landscape instead of everybody watching, reading 500 books of 800 pages each, or watching, 1 million hours of video. So none of those 2 approaches will work, right? So it's that dynamic, consumable, interactive content that will work. And I would say the third part of it, which I think as Cybrary becomes useful, is I do think cyber is key to our digital future. Right now, cyber is slowing the digital future because we worry about anything becoming digital and what the impact will be. The IoT hasn't fully taken off because of the issues with cyber. The cloud people are afraid to dot cloud because of the issue with cyber. And I think as Cybrary becomes successful, and as cyber becomes, just like we have internet access, it's there, we don't think about it. So my hope is we're ultimately able to make cyber as just another thing that we have to just bake in as we create a product and offering. And the learning that Cybrary provides is able to enable that vision.
I appreciate that. We appreciate all the advice and support that you give us. Just for our audience, any concluding thoughts?
I'll offer one quickly. I think that the idea that lifelong learning is the new approach is kind of cool, right? Because we all grew up with this idea that, when did you go to school? Oh, I went to such and such and I graduated at such and such. And then it's like, I'm done. I don't have to do that anymore. I think the idea that maybe it never ends is really cool. I love that idea of, instead of this thing you learn and then you live, that's a really cool concept, and something that I'd recommend that you guys continue to push. I think it's good for everyone.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, the world is a very dynamic place. And one of the things that I look for when I hire people and hire teams and set up teams for like really large incident management is are they continually learning? Do they have a passion for it? What are they doing hands-on to keep that going? And Cybrary also provides hands-on learning experiences as well. So you can try things out in a safe environment. Then you have the support of the community and mentors as well. So if you have any questions to ask, you can go ahead and ask directly to those individuals, those content community creators. So I really enjoy that because when I need people today, I need people with today's skills. And that's one of the reasons why I like Cybrary so much.
Just a final point for me, following on from Chris's point there. I think cybersecurity for far too long has had this obsession with specializing very early on in your career. I think it's the opposite of, let's say, the medical profession, where you go and try various different areas and then you specialize as, I don't know, an anaesthetist or something. In cyber, we seem very quick to say that someone is like, I don't know, an AppSec engineer or they work in cryptography. And I think what Cybrary gives people is that opportunity to be curious, to go out and try various different types of content, because I've seen too many good people leave the profession because they just got pigeonholed into an area far too early.
So I think I would just add saying, if we can enable for the individuals to be the lifelong learners, for the companies to be, fearless digital natives where they can ultimately solve their cyber talent challenge that they've had forever. And then for creators of new ideas, enable cyber to be an accelerator and not an inhibitor, which is what has become. Then I think that's the vision. I think that's the opportunity that we have in front of us. And I think that's what Cybrary can truly help enable.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for your advice and support. And I've learned so much from all of you. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Leif.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.